What the story, guys? There's another Irish Media Watch. I'm just following up my short on the surprise resignation of Paschal Donohoe yesterday. Specifically, the media response and the more information that we've got in relation to what he's going to get as a work package over there as second in command of the World Bank. As this has come out of left field, it's left the mainstream media a little bit on the short rank. So they've had to scramble to try and do pieces on this in order to get it onto the national airwaves. That's why Morning Ireland this morning was so funny, because they sent somebody down to Dublin Central to interview a load of people to find out what they thought was going on, and they couldn't find anyone to say they were sad to see the back of them. It was so funny, because this clearly wasn't a live ramble on the street pieces. They've actually collated as much as they could together to do a soft puff piece for them, and the responses range from the indifferent to sure they're all the same. The man himself was on David McCullough's later on at 9 o'clock, and in fairness, they gave him a bit of a hard time about why he was leaving. But it was still had the whole feel of a kind of a softball, well, sad to see you going type interview. I think the tensest has got was when he was asking him why he bothered standing for election in the first place, considering he's only in the job a year now. And had he communicated with anyone else in Fine Gael that he was going to do a legger. The interesting little tidbit from that seems to be that Paschal comes from the Leo camp. And when Leo stepped down and fell away, he didn't seem to have much loyalty to stay with Fine Gael. So there might be a kind of a little friction there between himself and Simon Harris. But the media is still desperately trying to get a handle on the situation. They're not quite sure what the story is. For instance, they're only starting to realise now that Gerard the Hutch, it looked like he's going to actually make a run again. I was musing that in my short yesterday, and it seems to be that he's going to go do that. Electorally, that's going to be fascinating, because it took the proportional representation system to get him to lose, because he barely got out, I think, by a Labour girl, got the last seat after the transfers from everyone else. That's not going to happen in a by-election. A by-election is going to be a popularity contest. So considering he got an enormous amount the first time round, that happens again. He could be in a good position of actually getting this seat. I mean, usually an independent would have to rely on the system to try and soak up votes after everyone else is gone. But when you got somebody that came in that far ahead the first time round, it's all up in the air. And it really kind of depends now on just how pissed off the people in Dublin Central are. Like I said, Paschal's only in a wet week, well, maybe a year. And that basically means that everyone that voted for him essentially just wasted their vote. So I can't see Fine Gael winning that seat. Considering the absolute state that Fianna falls in as well, it really could look like a go like an independent. And I tell you one thing, I would love to see the headlines where they have to say that it's Gerard Hutch TD. There will be absolute conniptions in the Irish Times of the world. But I think what's most fascinating about Paschal going to the World Bank is what it kind of reveals about Irish politics. Specifically in relation to, do we have a fifth columnist working within our government? Because this is now the second high-ranking politician who just quit their job to go feck off work in the private sector of some globalist or globalist-leaning organisation. You got Leo Varadkar working for Harvard University. Now, I've tried to find out how much he's earning there. The best I can find out that if you're a senior fellow, you end up between 100,000 to 800,000 a year. That's not a million miles away from what Paschal's getting in the World Bank as the number 2, getting 600,000 a year. And it makes me ask the question, how many people in our government right now see the end of their career path working for an organisation or an institution that works against the best interest of Ireland? I mean, Paschal was only a TD since 2011. It's very good for 14 years later to end up getting 600,000 a year working for the World Bank as a nice reward for services rendered in relation to bringing in things like the carbon tickets or enacting policies where you flood the countries with illegals. I mean, isn't it funny how the socio-economic policies that they've enacted over the last 10 years, which have radically changed this country, now don't affect either of them? They're both over in America, they're both living the life of Riley, and they're now both living in a country which has radically different policies in relation to immigration. I mean, this is what's really going on in places like Davos, where they just sit down and tell them, listen, we'll look after you if you sell out your countries. Just enact our policies by hook or by crook, take all the opprobrium for it, and at the end of the day, we'll look after you. All aided by abetted by their chosen mates in the media, who push their narratives and willingly conflate criminals with ordinary decent people coming in from abroad. I mean, I can't help thinking one of the reasons Paschal's might have left was the result of the presidential election, where for the first time the mainstream political establishment seemed to have got a real sense of the scale of the opprobrium that the people feel towards their policies, and the utter vandalisation of the countries, and indeed entire careers within the country. Paschal likes to stand over his record as a finance minister, but under his watch, whole careers like being in the guards, being a teacher, being a nurse, being a doctor even, have become the places where you can't even rent anywhere in this country. These were careers where a single person could actually buy a home and support a spouse. Now, that's just a fantasy now. And there is a sense out there that it's not going to be able to last much longer. So I think Paschal is getting while the getting's good. Which brings me back to myself to point. There seems to be an awful corrupting influence out there where people on a wage of, say, 150,000 as a TD or a minister could be approached by these organisations and told, look after us and there's a 600,000 a year job for you. And like my common refrain, if we actually had a media class worth its feckin' salt, somebody would be investigating this to see just who else is exposed. Ivan Yates is meant to go up towards some commission today to talk about his dealings as a media trainer. One of the things he said was that there's a massive conflict of interest between the media class and the political class. Well, I think you can now extend that to supranational organisations like the UN, the EU, Brussels, Davos, the UNHCR and a whole host of other organisations, and they're sitting TDs. Because this stuff is starting to look really squirrely. That's my update, guys. Thanks for listening. Like and subscribe and share if you can. And let us know what you think about this. Because it does seem to be that our TDs and our ministers are open to external influence. And I'm not sure what exactly we could do to stop it. Take care.